The night the kingdom burned, the enemy did not break the gate. The gate was opened from inside. The king did not fall by a stranger's sword. He fell while calling his own brother's name. And when the people cried, "Who did this?" the answer was more painful than death. Long before the betrayal, there was peace in the land of Zuhari. The farms were green, the rivers were full, and the drums of joy echoed every evening. The people loved their king because he ruled with wisdom and mercy. But even in the brightest kingdom, shadows can grow. And sometimes, the darkest shadow is born inside the palace. King Adisa had one brother. His name was Jabari. They grew up together, fought wars together, and once promised to protect each other forever. But only one of them wore the crown. And crowns are heavy, not only on the head, but on the heart.
Brother, do you ever wonder what it feels like to be ordinary? No man born royal is ordinary, Jabari.
At first, Jabari ignored the feeling. The small voice that asked, "Why not you?" But envy is like a seed. If you water it with silence, it grows. And in the quiet nights, while drums of praise sang for the king, Jabari lay awake. One market day, the people gathered to praise King Adisa for ending a long drought. They sang his name like he was sent by the ancestors. Jabari stood beside him, smiling outside, burning inside.
Adisa, son of the lion, father, brave!
And what am I?
That same evening, a stranger entered the kingdom. He did not wear royal cloth. He wore secrets. His eyes searched not for gold, but for weakness. The stranger found Jabari alone near the training ground. He spoke carefully, like a snake moving through grass. He did not insult the king. He only asked questions.
Tell me, if something happened to your brother, who would rule? Be careful with your words. I am only speaking destiny.
That night, Jabari did not sleep. The stranger's words moved inside him like fire in dry grass. Destiny, he repeated. For the first time, he imagined the crown on his own head. The next morning, King Adisa called his brother. He trusted Jabari more than anyone. He did not know that trust can sometimes be blind.
If I fall one day, you will protect this kingdom. Of course, my king.
Far beyond the hills, an enemy army waited. They had tried to defeat Zuhari many times. But now, they had something stronger than weapons. They had doubt inside the palace. Jabari met the stranger again. This time, he did not push him away. The line between loyalty and ambition was becoming thin.
Open the eastern gate during the next full moon. And my reward? A crown.
Days passed. The king prepared for a festival. The people danced. The drums grew louder. But inside Jabari, silence grew deeper. He avoided his brother's eyes. He touched the palace gate one night and did not remove his hand.
My prince, are you well? I am becoming what I was meant to be.
The full moon rose like a witness in the sky. The kingdom slept peacefully. They did not know that history was holding its breath. Jabari stood before the eastern gate. His hands trembled. Juan decision. Juan movement. Juan betrayal. The gate opened. The enemy rushed in like a storm. Fire followed their footsteps. Screams replaced songs.
Charge for the Empire!
King Adisa fought bravely, but when he saw the eastern gate open, his heart understood before his eyes did.
Yana! What have you done?
The king fell to his knees, wounded. The flames of his kingdom rose behind him, and standing in the distance was his brother, not as protector, but as the reason everything burned.
My brother, how could you betray us? I had no choice. Forgive me. This fire will consume us all! Why, brother?
The night did not end with the king's fall. It only grew darker. Fire spread across the palace roofs, while frightened villagers ran through the streets. The drums that once called people to celebration now called them to war. And above the chaos, the full moon watched silently, as if the ancestors themselves were judging what had happened. Zuhari stood still while the kingdom he grew up in burned before his eyes. The screams of the people stabbed his ears, but the stranger's promise echoed louder. A crown, a throne, a destiny. Yet something heavy settled in his chest. Something no crown could remove. From the smoke, the enemy general approached. His name was General Zarek, the man who had waited years to conquer Zuhari. Tonight, the gates opened not by force, but by betrayal.
You have done well, Prince Zuhari. Remember your promise. A promise is only as strong as the man who keeps it.
King Adisa still breathed, though his strength was fading. Loyal guards dragged him away from the battlefield into a hidden passage beneath the palace. The kingdom believed their king had fallen, but fate had not finished writing his story.
My king, stay with us! Protect the people.
The battle slowly faded. Enemy soldiers now filled the palace courtyard. Zuhari stood before the throne that once belonged to his brother. For years, he imagined this moment, but now that he stood before it, the throne looked colder than he remembered.
Sit, Prince Zuhari. I will sit when the kingdom kneels.
At dawn, the people of Zuhari were forced into the palace courtyard. The smoke still hung in the air like a curse. Mothers held their children tightly. Old men shook their heads in disbelief. They waited to hear who now ruled them. Then Zuhari walked out onto the palace balcony. The same people who once cheered beside him now looked at him with confusion and slowly realization. The enemy general raised his voice so the entire courtyard could hear him. The crowd gasped like a single wounded body.
People of Zuhari, your king is dead, but the kingdom will not remain without a ruler.
A golden crown was brought forward. It was the same crown King Adisa once wore with honor. Now, it waited for a different head and a different heart. But the crowd did not kneel. Instead, a heavy silence fell over the courtyard. Some people stared in shock. Others stared in anger. And a few began to cry. From the crowd, an old woman stepped forward. Her back was bent with age, but her voice carried the strength of truth. Zuhari's face hardened. The guilt inside him quickly turned into anger.
A crown given by enemies is not a crown of honor.
Take her away. Yes, my king.
Far below the palace, King Adisa slowly opened his eyes. The sound of distant voices echoed through the tunnels. His kingdom believed he was dead, but the ancestors had other plans.
My king, the kingdom has fallen. Then we will rise again.
Back in the palace hall, Zuhari finally sat on the throne. The wood creaked beneath him like it was protesting. He had won the crown, but the kingdom no longer felt like home. The mysterious stranger who planted the idea of betrayal appeared once more.
How does it feel to be king? Like sitting on fire.
Whispers spread across the kingdom. Some said the king had been betrayed. Others said the ancestors would punish the traitor. And in quiet homes across the land, people began to pray for the return of the true king. In the hidden tunnels, loyal warriors gathered around King Adisa.
We will take back the kingdom, not with revenge, but with justice.
Outside the kingdom walls, distant drums began to beat again. Not drums of celebration, but drums of rebellion. That night, Jabari could not sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw his brother falling. Jabari touched the crown on his head. It felt heavier than any weapon he had ever carried. Far beneath the palace, the true king stood up despite his wounds. The betrayal had taken his throne, but it had not taken his people. And soon, the kingdom would face a war not just for power, but for truce.
Prepare the warriors. Yes, my king.
Deep inside the forest beyond the kingdom, warriors gathered in silence. They came from villages, farms, and distant hills. Some carried old spears, others carried nothing but anger. But they all carried the same hope: the return of their true king. King Adisa stepped forward slowly, his wounds still fresh, yet his eyes burned with the strength of a lion. The warriors bowed their heads, not out of fear, but out of loyalty. Today they would fight, not for revenge, but for their home.
Long live the king!
Stand! Today we fight not for revenge, but for our home.
Inside the palace, Jabari sat alone on the throne. The hall was silent, but his mind was not. Every whisper of the wind sounded like his brother's voice, calling his name. Then a soldier rushed into the throne room with urgent news. Rebels were gathering outside the kingdom, and they were fighting under the banner of King Adisa. Jabari's heart pounded like war drums. He had seen his brother fall with his own eyes. Yet the people were whispering that the king still lived. Even General Zorek began to worry. Dead kings do not return unless the people love them.
Dead kings do not return unless the people love them.
Across the kingdom, the whispers turned into action. Villagers secretly joined the rebellion. Farmers became warriors. Hunters became scouts. The kingdom itself was waking up. At sunrise, King Adisa led his army toward the kingdom gates. The sound of drums echoed across the hills. It was the sound of a people ready to take back their future. From the palace towers, guards saw the army approaching. The drums grew louder. War had finally arrived. Jabari stepped onto the palace balcony and looked toward the horizon. And there, at the front of the approaching army, stood the brother he believed he had lost forever. The horns of war sounded. Spears clashed. Shields shattered. The kingdom shook under the thunder of battle. Despite his wounds, King Adisa fought like a storm. Every swing of his blade pushed the enemy back. But Jabari could no longer hide behind the throne. If he wanted the crown, he had to defend it himself. He walked onto the battlefield. Soon, the fighting slowed as the two brothers finally stood face to face. The battlefield grew quiet around them. Years of love, loyalty, jealous betrayal stood between them. Adisa asked the question that had burned in his heart since the night of betrayal. Why? Jabari answered with the truth he had carried for too long. He had lived in his brother's shadow, and the shadow had slowly turned into envy. For a moment, Adisa lowered his weapon, because the truth was something Jabari never understood. He had never been a shadow. He had always been his brother's strength. But some wounds run deeper than words.
Why, Jabari? Because I lived in your shadow. You were never my shadow. You were my strength. It didn't feel like it. I wanted to be seen too.
The brothers raised their weapons, and the duel began. Steel clashed against steel. Dust rose from the battlefield. The fight was fierce, but the weight in Jabari's heart made his movements heavy. Adisa fought with the strength of justice. Jabari fought with the burden of guilt. Finally, Jabari's weapon was knocked from his hand. He fell to his knees. He looked up at his brother and asked for the end. Adisa raised his blade, but slowly lowered it again. He would not kill his brother. The warriors and villagers watching understood something in that moment. They saw the difference between ruling with fear and ruling with honor. For the first time since the betrayal, Jabari cried. He realized the truth too late. Seeing the kingdom unite again, General Zorek and his soldiers fled the battlefield. The war was over. The people of Zuhari had taken back their home. Soon, the kingdom gathered once more in the palace courtyard. But this time they waited to hear the fate of the man who betrayed them. King Adisa looked at his brother with heavy eyes. He chose not to take his life. Instead, Jabari would live with the memory of his choices. The former prince was stripped of his title and sent away from the kingdom forever. Alone, he walked beyond the gates of the land he once tried to rule. The people slowly began rebuilding their homes. The fires of war faded, and the kingdom slowly healed. King Adisa returned to the throne. But the crown now meant something deeper than power. Years later, elders would sit beside village fires and tell the story of the brother who betrayed a kingdom and the king who chose mercy over revenge. Because the greatest kingdoms are not protected by walls or swords. They are protected by the hearts of the people and the choices of those who lead them